Paranormal King Radio Network, bringing you the best paranormal hosts and guests. Bringing you the best paranormal shows and features. Playing the top musical artists from around the world. Paranormal King Radio Network. With the best paranormal hosts and guests. The best in paranormal shows and features. Playing the best musical artists from around the world. Paranormal King Radio Network. The paranormal will never be the same.
Your radio has been taken over by forces unknown. Be prepared as we discuss the paranormal. Things unseen, unknown, and unexplained. Here on the Half-Past Dead Paranormal Roundtable on the Paranormal King Radio Network with your hosts Roger Belt and Frank Lee. Keep listening if you dare.
Okay, everybody, we are live. Welcome to Half-Past Dead Paranormal Roundtable. I am your host, Roger Belt, along with...
And I'm Frank Lee, co-hosting tonight.
And we have with us a very lovely, sweet lady, also a paranormal author, Miss Karen Vance Hammond. And Karen, say hello to everybody.
I am here, and I appreciate the both of you having me on tonight. What an honor it is to be brought back to your wonderful radio show. Thousands upon thousands listened the last time that I was on, and I was so grateful for that. And when you contacted me and wanted me back on the show, wow, that absolutely incredible. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, Hank. I really appreciate it, Roger.
We thank you very much. And we are on, of course, the last time you were on, we were on CJ Mars Network, and a lot of different listeners there. We are on Paranormal King Radio Network, folks, and some of you may not be familiar with Karen. She is a paranormal author of the book Shoe Marks, which is a reality-based novel based on true events. So I read it, and yes, it's very, very, very exciting. I couldn't put that book down, so to speak. It was PDF, so I couldn't put my screen down. There you go. But anyway, yes, it's very good.
Couldn't put it down.
Yes, and Frank is not familiar. He hasn't had a chance to read this book yet. So, uh, Karen, if you possibly could, send him that PDF if you get a chance and let him check that out because it will blow his mind.
I sure will. I
Well,
sure will.
yeah, I'll have a lot of questions for you. So,
Now,
so
also,
be ready.
and we're going to get into some other stuff because also, she has co-written some stuff with Kimberly Brulette called Secrets in the Shallows, and it is a how many different parts of that is there?
Actually, there is three parts to that. Secrets in the Shallows is actually the first novel that came out. It's with the Monastery Murders series, and we are working on our next novel, which is called Devil in the Details, and that should be coming up within the next couple of months, and I'm very, very excited about that. But yes, my first novel is called Shoe Marks, and it is a paranormal inspired by true events that took place in Texas. So, both of those novels are out on the market. Both are award-winning novels. Shoe Marks was awarded literary category in Massachusetts, which I was not expecting to win, but lo and behold, it did, and I am just so grateful for that. And also, Secrets in the Shallows, like I said, which is a paranormal mystery, that one also won literary category in Massachusetts at the Paranormal Award. So I was very, very proud of that. So,
That's awesome.
doing a lot of writing.
I'm sorry. Uh, and also, she is working on a novel called The Stone, which is also based on some paranormal facts, is it not?
Yes, it is. It most certainly is.
And that's one that
This
I'm waiting to read right there.
Yes, the stone is actually in production. I'm about halfway through that one. The stone is, of course, I don't want to give everything away, but it is based on true events that happened to a family in Northeast Texas, up by Marshall and Longview, close to Shreveport, Louisiana. What happened was that they had 150 acres, and there were some hills that the father did not like. So he took a bulldozer to them. Lo and behold, he found Indian artifacts, and he should have left them alone, but he did not.
Right.
He brought them into his home, including a stone that I have had professionally had people look at to tell me what type of stone it is. And when the father brought that stone in his house, all hell broke loose. It was so bad that the family had to sell the house and move. And so I have been asked by this family who read
Oh, I
Shoe
thought they were
Marks.
still there.
Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no, 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 no. No, this family was fighting for their lives. There was physical trauma that happened to every one of the family members. And no, they are not have visited the family at their home, their current home now, up in Northeast Texas. I have been able to visit them, take pictures of the stone. They sent me over 100 pages. And of course, when you and I were Skyping, I showed you those pages. And I showed you a picture of the stone. And so, no, they had to leave their home. And so, I think that what you're thinking of, excuse me, I'm allergic to Houston. I think that what you're thinking of is that in Shoe Marks, the family is still there. But in The Stone, a paranormal that I am writing that is inspired by true events that took place in Northeast Texas, they did sell that home. And so, like I said, I was blessed to see the family. I was blessed to talk to the family. I have visited times, making sure that I'm getting the story right, making sure that um, that everything is on the up and up. And that's something when you write a novel, and I've explained this to several people. When you write a novel, You don't just sit down and write, especially if it's inspired by true events. Shoe marks was inspired by true events. The stone will be inspired by true events. You don't just sit down and start writing. There is a lot of research that goes into a making of the novel. A lot of people don't realize how much work there is when a person writes a novel.
Okay, now shoe marks, since Frank is not familiar with that,
Hmm.
I can't remember all of it. It's been a while, but
Mm-hmm.
um, kind of give Frank and everybody out there listening a little bit of the rundown of how that started.
How it actually started was that I met the person who lived inside of the famous Horton home here in Texas. And we were talking, we were having lunch together and becoming friends. And she revealed to me that she had lived in a home that had paranormal activity in it for over 25 years. And I was just like stone faced when I was talking to her because she was telling me things that I had experienced just a little bit different paranormal activity when I lived in a home also in Texas. My husband and I have since moved from that home, but I said, I really would like to know more about what you have experienced, what your family has experienced, and I would like to come visit you, visit the home, which is what I did. Now, when I did that, I was absolutely blown away. I was able to talk to some family members. I was able to talk to her, and I went back and I told my husband, I said, I have met this wonderful woman that has lived in a home that had paranormal activity in it for over 25 years. And I'm thinking about writing about it. Now, Roger and Frank, I had never even thought about writing a novel before. Never in my mind did it ever even conceive the idea of writing a novel before. I mean, here I am not even being able to read when I was 11 years old, being placed in special education, couldn't even go to a regular college because I could not read well, I could not write well. I had to go to the Jones Learning Center at University of the Ozarks. I've never entered a regular classroom. No way would I ever even think having dyslexia, having learning disabilities, having reading disabilities, having to deal with all this. Never in my mind did I ever conceive writing a novel. Ever. And I went to
Well,
my husband and I told him I would like to try. So I went back to Jennifer and I said, your story needs to be shared. It needs to be told. The hell that you have had to go through, the hell that your family went through, this story needs to be shared. And I said to her, do you mind if I attempt to write a novel about it? And she said, I think it would be a wonderful idea. I sat down and I started writing it. And yes, people have asked, did I experience paranormal activity when I was writing the book? Yes, I have. And Roger, I told you about it. When this novel actually starts in 1899, we need to back up a little bit. 1899. Now, at that time, Texas was at the end part of homesteading. What happened was that if you could have a piece of land and if you could farm that land for 5 years, that land was yours. And they were still giving away land grants at that time. Now, there was a young woman. Her name was Maggie Horton. She was pregnant at 16 years of age, and at that time, they didn't have a teenage life like they do now. They didn't have a teenage life like they did back in the 1940s, which is what I'm about to talk about. They worked the farm. You prayed you had children. You prayed you had sons to work that farm. And she gave birth to her firstborn son. And 3 days later, Roger, she was dead. Her
wow.
husband, James Horton, told everybody, and I have this in the book, told everybody that she had died from dehydration and exhaustion. Now, I did some research on that. Yes, there was a horrible drought in 1899, a terrible drought in the 1800s. He had an alibi, but he murdered her. You've read it, Roger. You know. Those in attendance believed hook, line, and sinker what he had said. And he picked up everything, Frank, and he left. He left furniture. He left animals. He left his life there because the paranormal activity started. Now, the Horton home, beautiful house, absolutely beautiful. If you want to get a taste of what the home looks like, the wind, think of that home, the big white columns. It was a beautiful home, built from the ground up by Maggie and James Horton, and it was homesteaded in Texas. It sat vacant for a while. At one time, there was talk about making it into the Horton Home Museum. Another time, there was talk about making it into a business. Another time, making it into a bed and breakfast, because Northeast Texas, especially Jefferson and that surrounding area, is notorious for bed and breakfasts. So it sat vacant for a while. It finally sold. We're going to jump ahead a little bit. 1944, World War II time. Everything was about the war. You could not open up the newspaper without reading about what was happening in Europe. Our boys were over there, and we were very, very patriotic over here in the United States. 1944, this house is set vacant. Now, you have to understand something, and I think that the listeners and those that listen in archives will also understand this. There was a lot of rationing back then. Sugar, flour, pantyhose, stockings, shoes, leather. Things were being made for the boys overseas, and your textile industries and a whole bunch of other industries were really making money off of this war because they needed supply. Okay, there's this sweet family of four. They're called Jennifer Stone, her father, Jeremy Stone, her pregnant mother, soon to deliver a third child. Her name was Laura Stone. He was wounded in World War II at Utah Beach and at Market Garden. He had had enough of war. He was sick of being shot up. So he had an honorable discharge. He wanted to start his life over. He wanted to get away from the war. They found this home through a realtor. Her name was Mrs. King, and I was able to track down records on her. At that time, and I'm going back to the rationing because there's a big point in this, you could not buy a home. You were lucky if you could sell a home. You were lucky if you could buy a home back at that time because everything was about the war. Now, big commission. Mrs. King wanted that commission. She wanted it very badly, and I have that depicted in the novel. She allowed this family, if you do your research about World War II, there were a lot of people back in that time. You have to remember, this is the ending time of the Great Depression. People were still living in their cars because they had lost their homes. They had to foreclose on their homes. A lot of people lost their farms because they couldn't make their farm payment. So the Great Depression really hit the United States in such a catastrophic way. But World War II helped the United States get out of that depression. Mrs. King wanted this sale so bad, and she knew about Maggie Horton's death. She knew that there was paranormal activity in that home, and she allowed this family to sink every stinking dime, drain their savings, buy this home so they would not have a house note, and she allowed it. And this family who thinks they are buying their dream home, they're going to settle down, they're going to have a great life. What Jeremy Stone did not know was that he was buying hell. Jennifer remembers at 10 years old, standing on the by the door. They had just bought the home. Their suitcases were still in the van. Their belongings were still in the moving truck. And Jeremy Stone pulls out the front door key, and when he proceeds to put it in the keyhole, the door opens. And that's when the paranormal activity started on this sweet family. The things that they had to go through was absolutely hellacious. This was a Christian family. They went to church every time the doors were open. Every time. Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, they were there. And they had no idea, Roger and Frank, how to deal with this. Now, it started very sudden. A draft of wind. Maybe a door would open. Maybe they would hear a creaking sound. And Jeremy kept telling the family, honey, everything's okay. It's an old house. You're going to have noises. You may have maybe the foundation is not settled very well. Maybe the foundation isn't settled. Well, I think since 1899, I think the foundation has had plenty of time to settle. Laura had, and Jennifer told me this, Laura had ill feelings about the home. She fell in love with it. She fell in love with it. But when she moved in, she knew that something was not right. Her husband downplays it, blames it on her pregnancy. Oh, honey, you're just not feeling good. You know, you're about to deliver. You know, your hormones are out of whack. You're having all these feelings. You're nesting. And that's what it is. It has to be. It has to be. These cold spots and hot spots and no way. But Laura kept saying, something is wrong in this house and I can feel it. The very first paranormal activity that I actually have in the book, like I said, she's pregnant, she's about to deliver, she's in her 9th month. She walks down the stairs, she can't sleep, she's exhausted, and she flicks on the kitchen light switch. And that entire kitchen looked like a tornado had gone through it. There were dishes that were stacked. Pots and pans were everywhere. Towels were everywhere. Forks, spoons, knives. I mean, it looked like somebody had come in and just ransacked the kitchen. And she sees her breath and she feels a gust of this air, this stinchy, breathy air that comes on her neck, and she lets out a scream. Her children, and Jennifer remembers this, her children came down thinking that she had started labor. No, she didn't. The children could see their own breaths, and the thermometer on the wall started moving to the left, and down, 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 down it goes. And Laura kept saying, kids, you're playing a trick on me. You're playing a trick on me. You have to be playing a trick on me. Why are you doing this? Why are you playing on me like this? And they said, Mom, we just got up. We did not do this. And Laura told her husband, you better come up with something quick, Jeremy Stone, or I am out of this house so quick. I've been telling you that I have been feeling cold spots, telling you that I have been going through hot spots, telling you that things are not right in this home, and now look at this. You explain that to me. Honey, their toy dachshund ran over by the banister and found 2 deep indentions in the wood plank floor. Now, there were, at that time, they did not use linoleum. They did not use the type of flooring that is used today. They used what was called wood plank floor. That's what they used back then. There were 2 deep indentions by the banister, and they were moist and they were red. Honey, their toy dachshund, starts licking what is in these 2 indentions. The son goes and gets Jeremy Stone, says, I found something, you need to come look at it. and he sticks his finger in it. Jeremy comes down, sticks his finger in it, and says, "This is awful. This smells like blood to me." And that is the beginning of Shoe Marks. Absolutely hellacious story.
Oh, and
When
that is not that's the beginning. That is nowhere near the whole story.
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, I'm not even to chapter 3. I mean, what this family had to go through was something else. They knew when paranormal activity was going to start. You know, like I said at first, it was very subtle, very, very subtle. But the more activity, the more paranormal activity started. There were times that they had to huddle as a family in the living room trying to cover their faces so glass wouldn't cut their skin up. Eh, and another thing too that is very interesting, and people have said that it's very interesting, is that in the Horton home they could never keep the clock set. No matter how new the clock was or how old the clock was, if you set it at 12 o'clock, you could turn around and it was at 9. And there was a running joke in the house. "Jennifer, what time is it?" "Oh, it's 9 o'clock." The clocks could never be set. And when the paranormal investigators came inside the home, they said that is where Maggie Horton took her last breath. Now, like I said, this was a Christian family. They had no idea what they were dealing with, and they wanted this entity, they wanted this paranormal activity to end. They were desperate for it to end. They could not move. Could not move. Another time, right after before well, excuse me, during when James Collins Stone was in the hospital, her mother had given birth to James Collins Stone. Jennifer and Robert, at that time, Jennifer was 10, Robert was 7. They went to the barn and they found some furniture. Now, Roger, this is really creepy, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what you told me about the baby bed.
Yes, they found some furniture because they did not have any furniture for the baby. Like I said, they had just moved into this house. They were dealing with paranormal activity. It was horrible. But they found some baby furniture up in the loft, and it was in the corner. It was a wooden, I want to call it a bassinet, but it's really not a bassinet. It's more of a small baby bed that swivels back and forth on the floor. But they also found a rocking chair, beautiful carved rocking chair, covered in cobwebs. The paint was deteriorated. Some spots on the baby bed, and the rocking chair was molded with age and it was weathered. The children found it and they said, "If we can clean this up, what a neat gift! What a fantastic gift from Mommy! Oh my gosh, she'll have something to put the baby in! We can paint this!" And they bring it down and they start painting it. And while they were painting it, they hear and they didn't know where it was coming from. They thought that their mom had come home. They didn't know if it was the neighbor, but they heard this crying, Jennifer said, this deep, sad, this deep, sad cry. They continue painting the baby bed and they bring it inside of the home and they take it upstairs. They take the rocker upstairs. But what they did not know, what they had absolutely no clue on, was that they were bringing Maggie Horton's furniture back into the home.
That's what I was gonna say. That was her child's baby bed or crib,
Yes, that is what
and that was probably, I'm gonna say, the rocking chair that she would sit in to rock the baby in.
I am also thinking too. Um, After James Collins Stone was born, um, things had kind of quieted down for a few weeks. And when I say a few weeks, I mean only just a few weeks. They hear Laura Stone. She hears, Mama, Mama, Nana, Mama. Wanna play, Mama? Come on, play with me, Mama. And she gets up and she's thinking that it's Robert or Jennifer. And she listens even more. Mama, Mama. And she does not recognize the voice, and she goes into James Colin Stone's room, and in front of that rocking chair, she sees her son suspended in thin air in front of a moving rocking chair.
Wow.
Now, there was a doll that was found also, and I failed to mention this, but I'm going to mention it now. There was a doll that was found in the barn, and of course, Jennifer took a liking to that doll. Half the hair was missing on it. It was dirty. It had cobwebs all over it, but she was able to wash that doll, bring some life back into that doll. And when the family ran into, of course, Laura went first, but when the family went into James Colin Stone's room and found that baby suspended in front of a moving rocking chair, she hears a voice. When she tugs on her son, it's like playing tug of war, and she says, "Give me back my baby!" And she hears a voice, and every one of them hear it, and it said, "That baby is yours. This one is mine." You think that this family bought their dream home? If people think that that the Stone family bought the home that they were going to raise their kids in, that they were going to have a loving family, they were sorely, sorely mistaken, because, like I said, they had bought hell.
Okay, now they painted up the furniture and they put it in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And the doll, wasn't there something about the doll on the bed?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. This doll has significance. Now, at this point, the family's not sure what type of significance. And I know that many of you, or some of you, may have read in other documentaries about walls bleeding, about spirits being manifested into something. But in this case, the spirit had manifested inside of the doll, which is a very significant point on what this family had to go through. After James Colin Stone was found suspended in thin air, Laura would not leave her baby's side for anything. No matter where she was, that baby was in a playpen. If she moved to the kitchen to clean the kitchen, she would move the playpen. If she went back into the living room, she would move the playpen. If she went upstairs, there was another playpen upstairs. Laura would not leave that baby out of her sight. She was scared to death, absolutely terrified to leave that baby. Now, once again, Jennifer and Robert, they were nearby. The husband would work. He had gotten a new job teaching history at the college. She hears once again, "Mama, peekaboo, I want to play with you. Ring around the rosy, pocketball posy, as if we all fall down." As she's terrified, and she goes upstairs, she creeps upstairs, and she hears it again. "Mommy, I see you. I want to play. Come on, Mama, let's play." She hears the voice, and she goes down the hall, and at this point, she is sweating profusely. She is scared to death, and she goes in her bedroom, the master bedroom, and she sees that doll, that Jennifer and Robert had found in the barn when they were painting the furniture, and that doll was on the bed, and it was bleeding out of its mouth, and it was talking, and she went ballistic. The children said that she ran in a corner downstairs. She was in the corner with her knees up under her chin, and she was rocking back and forth like a deranged lunatic. It had affected her that much. When paranormal activity would start, a lot of times they would hear footsteps. A lot of times they would hear singing. Maggie Horton loved to sing. A lot of times they would hear running. Excuse me. But they knew when it would start, when they could see their breath. And that's when they would huddle together. Jennifer remembers she was working a crossword puzzle. The family was in there. They were listening to the war on the radio. And they felt a gust of chill in their bodies, and they said, oh no, it's starting again. Books would start flying, glass was breaking. They could look outside and they could see a dark black cloud above the house in the area like a storm, but they could also see the lining of the storm, and it was over their home. It was that time that Jennifer, she said, I have never been so terrified in all of my life. She said, even when I would play checkers, at that time, they didn't have the plastic checkers. They had the wooden checkers, and Robert and Jennifer were playing checkers, and one of those checkers started moving on the board as though somebody was moving it. Another time, Laura Stone had put some flowers on a table, and when she turned, she saw this gray mist, this gray figure, if you will, out of the corner of her eye, and she starts screaming, you leave my family alone! You get out of this house! You leave us alone! Why are you here? What do you want? And that table starts jiggling, and it flips over. The roses go everywhere. Water goes everywhere, and she dashes out of that house. And she says to her husband, who was in the barn, we better move. We've got to get out of this house. She looks up at the house, and she starts screaming because she had left James Collins Stone alone. And she goes to the front door. It slams right in her face, and she's pounding, you let me in, you let me in, and she can't get in. Finally, the husband comes, lets her in the home, and she hears crying. And she thought it was her baby. She went to James Collins Stone, and he was sleeping soundly. I mean, the hell with this family. They were lost. Roger and Frank, they didn't know what to do. I mean, they were fighting for their lives. The lack of sleep that this family had. Terrified. Every single night there was paranormal activity. They never knew when it was going to happen during the day. Laura would never leave her baby, ever. The children would go off to school and come home and see their mother just exhausted and scared and sitting in a corner. It was horrible, horrible. The children would not even sleep in their own beds. They had to sleep with each other. They were that frightened. The father, of course, back in World War II, back in the 1940s, Frank and Roger, you don't go to people and say, I have a ghost in my house. You don't go to people and do that. They're going to put you in the nut farm. You don't go to your church member and say, I need to confide in you. I need to get something off my chest. I'm a Christian, and yes, I do believe in God, but there's an entity in my home that I absolutely don't understand. And you know, back then, of course, some people would do it now, of course, but some people would say, "You Satanist! You non-believer!" You know, they didn't believe in that kind of stuff. You did not mention to people at that time. I have a spirit in my house I can get rid of. You know, my family's frightened. I'm scared to death. There's things moving.
Well, you didn't even mention stuff like that in the 40s. It was still like
Right.
taboo.
Oh, absolutely, it was taboo.
Hmm.
I
Well,
mean,
that's just, just 15 years ago when
oh
when I
yeah,
started investigating. There were a lot of people that I ran into. It amazes me, however, just such a short time that the opinion about the paranormal has changed. So,
yes,
so
yes,
what you're saying is absolutely true.
absolutely. This family, they
So back then, you basically had to deal with that stuff yourself.
that's right. That's right. Unless if you wanted to be called every name in the book, a Satanist, a non-believer, a blasphemist, you better believe it.
Or you were
Hmm.
summoning up demons or all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Well, it seems like most of your cases back then were either one extreme or the other. You were met with extreme superstition, and like you said, you were practicing some sort of witchcraft. You were a Satanist. You were,
Right.
some type of non-believer, a heretic, whatever.
right.
Or on the opposite end of the spectrum, you were you had some type of psychosis. You were suffering
Mentally
from,
ill.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
right. You needed to be locked away somewhere instead of, this couldn't be real. There was no in between. There was no entertaining the thought of, hey, this person may not, this might not be something that they've done. There might not be something wrong with this person. This person might not have done something to provoke this.
Right.
So people were deathly afraid to bring this up because they didn't
Oh
want
yeah,
either one of those stigmas put on them.
Well,
absolutely.
and a lot of times, in cases like that back then, that was the main thing that everybody would say. Well, you must have done something to cause this. Stuff like this don't just happen.
Right. They were called every name in the book when it got out, and people said, and I don't know if I truly believe this or not. I think that some things do happen for a reason, but people that some of their church members came to them who were loving, who were friends, who brought them food when they moved in, who welcomed them into the area, came back and turned their backs on them and said, "Your sin has caused this.
Right.
Exactly.
You're not living a life. You're not living a clean life. You better start changing your walk because your sins have caused this." That's what's in that house is your sin. Not that there's really a ghost in there. I mean, come on. They were told that. They lost a lot of friends, let me tell you. Um, but like I said, they didn't know how to deal with this. I mean, every night they were saying the Lord's Prayer. Every night.
Yes.
They uh, they had no idea. They did not know what to do. Jeremy Stone worked at the university, and he did run into somebody who did know something about it. And it was a doctor who taught, a professor who taught on the university. And Jeremy confided into him when he told this professor, this doctor, Dr. Klum, said, "I know exactly where you live and I've been itching to get in that house." Everybody knows that there's a ghost in there. Everybody knows that there's something in that home. Before the Stones bought that home, and I have this in the book, there were people that would buy that house, and let me tell you something, Roger and Frank, they would move right back out, leave
Hmm.
furniture behind, leave motorbikes behind, leave pots and pans and dishes behind, they could not keep anybody in that house very long. So
Right.
people knew about the Horton home. Was it taboo? You better believe it was. Back in
Okay.
1944, they didn't talk about that stuff.
I'm going to back you up a little bit and let you tell about um, where he buried his wife when he killed
Oh,
her,
yes,
and about the reporters that came, and
yes,
also the guy in the barn.
yes, yes. Oh, Lord, yes. That's what I was getting to. They really needed some help. And of course, I can't share all of the book because I don't have 9 hours. I mean, the book is 300 pages long. But I will definitely share the highlights with you. Like I said, they needed help. And uh, Jeremy had befriended somebody on the university who knew of this home. And um, he tried to direct them to a parapsychologist, if you will, also a psychologist. And back, they did go see the psychologist. They did. And they were embarrassed because at first the psychologist sat down and said, okay, what's your problem? You're having marital problems. You, you're having teenage problems. How can I help you? And he was interested, very interested to find out that this family had paranormal activity in that home. Back in 1944, World War II time, in the 1940s, and even in the 1930s when um, before the war actually started, people would dig what was called victory gardens. They did it in Europe. They had Anderson shelters. But because of the rationing, they had to have these victory gardens, and it was dig for victory. Well, it
Right.
infiltrated into the United States, and people all over the United States were growing these dig for victory gardens because of the rationing. Now, with all the paranormal happening inside of the home, babies suspended in thin air, cold spots, hot spots, tables overturning, you were fighting for your lives. You never knew when your face was going to be cut up with glass, in other words. I mean, it was horrible. Jeremy, of course, he wanted to dig for victory. Like I said, this family needed help. They had no idea what they were dealing with. And I felt like it was really important to not only share the paranormal activity in shoe marks, which is what the story is about. It's about the Stone family and what they had to go through. But I also felt like that it was very important to show the post-traumatic stress disorder that James Horton had to go through. I didn't want to leave anything out. I wanted to bring everything full circle in this novel. I needed to show what this family was all about. Not only was he wounded at Market Garden, not only was he wounded at Utah Beach, it, at Normandy, not only was he dealing with paranormal activity, horrible post-traumatic stress disorder, but he also had a new baby. So this man, Jeremy Stone, had a lot on his plate. They get a shovel, they go out in the yard, and they think that they have found the perfect spot for the Victory Garden. And it was close to a large oak shade tree. Jeremy Stone, of course, having his spade, having his shovel, if you will, digging foxholes in Normandy. He loses himself once, and I have this depicted in the book. I tell you what, when you're scared, when bullets are flying over your head and there's 88 cannons raining down on you, you can dig 6 feet pretty damn quick. And that is exactly what he did. And he hit something hard, and he hit another thing that was hard, and he brings up an arm bone, and a leg bone, and a rib cage, and a skull, Maggie Horton's wedding ring, and he digs up the boots with half the heels missing. Not only were they dealing with this horrible paranormal activity inside of their home, but she was buried right under their noses, and they didn't even know it. Did not even know it. She was right there all along. Jeremy, of course, we had to call the authorities. There's this corpse. There's this skeleton in pieces. And he had, by law, you have to call, and he did. Well, somehow it leaked. Somehow it leaked that there were human remains the on the Horton home property. And the newspaper reporters come out and they start flashing their cameras, their Vito cameras. That's what they had back then. Vito cameras, very, very popular. These Vito cameras, and start flashing pictures, not only of Maggie Horton's remains, not only of Maggie Horton's crumbled tombstone, which has the date on it, not only of the children, but when they go back and they start developing their film, they see Maggie Horton's silhouette. And they are like, we have the story of the lifetime. We have got the story of our lives. And they were so happy to have this and so happy to have these pictures. They were going to make $1 million, and they knew it because they had caught a ghost on their film. They had caught an apparition in their pictures, and they posted it on the front page of the paper. Now, if you can imagine people coming in their cars, sitting on the fence post in front of the house, taking pictures, and how they would knock on the Hortons, how they would knock on the Horton house door, waking Jennifer and Robert and the baby and Jeremy and Laura up at 2 o'clock in the morning, wanting to get in. It was horrible. They could not sleep. The phone was ringing off the wall. It was like going to see somebody famous. I mean, there were a line of cars on that country road that wanted to pass by the famous Horton house where Maggie Horton's remains were found. The house that's haunted, the house that has Maggie Horton's spirit in it. I mean, it had made news. And if you can imagine that happening today in 2015, and it did 2 years ago, where another sweet family had moved away from a home that had paranormal activity in it, and a movie was made about it. And if you can imagine this sweet family that bought this farmhouse, what they had to go through in 2012, maybe 2011, think of what they had to go through in 1944, 1945. I mean, it was unheard of to have paranormal activity inside of a home. You didn't talk about that back then. It was horrible. They had to shut their blinds. They had to shut their drapes. It was really, really something. The book is called Shoe Marks. And like I said, it's my very first novel that I've written. And a lot of people have really enjoyed it. A lot of people have.
Oh, I enjoyed it. It was a very good book. For
Thank
those
you.
of you that haven't read it, get you a copy. You will enjoy it, I promise.
Yes, I definitely can't wait to read it because it sounds, there's so many aspects of it that have not only, so many of the phenomena you've described have not only been described in that particular case, but, we've heard from other cases as well. I mean,
That's right.
these are
Okay,
not things that, you know, are unbelievable. We've
and
seen things.
she hasn't touched on uh, the man that was in the barn. His spirit also is on the property.
Yes, yes. Oh my gosh, yes. There is another one. Now this is the one that Robert's drawn to. Robert spent a lot of time down at the pond, And I don't really touch on John Smith too much. From what I understand about John Smith, he was Maggie Horton's first boyfriend, from what I understand by talking to people where their ancestors had lived in Ellensville, Texas. Of course, the famous Horton House is there. There's some things that I have had to change to protect the privacy of others, and I do understand that. And I know that people do appreciate that as well. Uh, there's another person that did die on the property, and his name was John Smith, and he was a wanderer. He was a cowboy, and he would search for work. He would mend fences. He would go down to Galveston and help on ships, and he would do other things, and he would ride back, and he would help in different types of oil fields and so on and so forth. Well, not oil fields, of course. Oil wasn't discovered until 1901, but he would help with other laboring work that he would go to. And so he, from what I understand, was Maggie Horton's first boyfriend. He was murdered, I understand, or had an accident on the property. And Robert, little Robert, 10 years old, had the fascination with the pond. And when he at one time stuck a tree limb in the pond and saw the ripples, he said that he saw a man standing behind him with a cowboy hat. When he looked into the reflection of the water, he saw this man in a cowboy hat, a white shirt, a vest, chaps, and boots. And there were maggots coming out of his neck. And he turned around and he vanished. He would go down to the pond again, and he would see this same man. After a lot of the paranormal activity that the Stone family had to go through, Jeremy Horton walked outside and he sees this cowboy, and he has blood all over his shirt. And this cowboy is saying, "Where's the fence? I gotta mend the fence. Where's the fence? I'm gonna get in trouble. I gotta mend the fence. The storm's coming. The storm's coming." And Jeremy said, "Whoa, mister, there is no fence here, sir. We don't have a fence here." "Oh, yes, there's a fence." And the cowboy, John Smith, walked away. And of course, Jeremy Stone tried to go after him and never saw him again. They did find a saddle that did have JS engraved on it in the barn. They did find that. But Robert did have a fascination with this cowboy. And like I said, he would always see him in the reflection of the pond. And I felt like that it was important, I felt like it was very important not only to depict what Maggie Horton is capable of, but also that John Smith was on this property, and he was always looking for a fence to mend. It was like he was set in time, and he could not move over to the other side.
Okay, now, do you think, and I would be led to believe that that's where uh, Mr. Horton would have killed John Smith was around that pond. Maybe he threw his body in the pond. Who knows? But why would he be seen there?
You know, doing the investigations and going and talking to family members whose ancestors had lived in a small town. This is a small town where everybody knows your name. Everybody knows your business before you do. And people just don't leave. You know, the old folks, they stay. And so I was able to talk to a lot of family members whose ancestors had lived in Ellensville and actually knew of Maggie and James Horton. If you think about it, I know it's 100 years, but if you think about it, that's not really too far back. If you think about it, there's a couple of ancestors that have come and gone, but the stories still remain. And, people would tell their children and tell their children. And so I was able to find some people who did know John Smith and some people who did know Maggie Horton and people who did know um, Jeremy Horton as well. And it was always a mystery on what happened to uh, John Smith. So it's I felt like it was really important, like I said, to bring everything full circle in the story of shoe marks. I felt like that it was important to touch on everything, on what this family had to go through. Now, one of the things that people do ask me about is the sage. They'll ask me about the sage. Did Jennifer performed the sage activity with her mom? Of course, she did several times. But there was also a very, very dear friend named Judith Ferguson, whose son died at Utah Beach and died in the war. And Jeremy Stone brought home this book about spirits and ghosts and, of course, what was known back then. And she read that if you use sage, if you light sage, and if you say prayers, it'll leave. Well, she was excited, and so she gets a friend, and they go to every corner. And of course, they're coughing their lungs out. The smoke is going everywhere. And they said Psalm 91, and excuse me, Laura kept saying, nothing evil shall enter this home, only good. She wanted to get the paranormal activity out of her house. Nothing evil shall enter this house, only good. And they were baffled. They were baffled on why Maggie Horton's spirit was still there. They were baffled on why they had said all these prayers and their strong faith in God and Christ, and how they had prayed that God would deliver them from this home, that the spirit would go away and they could have peace. Why? I prayed everything, she said, that nothing evil shall enter this house, but only good. And the paranormal investigator that came to help them said, but Laura, you're missing the entire point. Maggie Horton's not evil. You're praying nothing evil shall enter this house. But Maggie Horton's not evil. She was a kid, 16 years of age, who was murdered.
Okay, we are back, everybody. Hope y'all enjoyed that little break.
I know I did. I got me a full coffee cup here, and I am ready to listen to some more. This has just been awesome.
Yes, it is, and uh, Karen's having a problem getting in the chat room, y'all. She's been trying, but for some reason it's not letting her in here. Anyway, uh, you told me before about um, pictures on the wall in the local store of the actual Horton family and all that kind of stuff, which is very interesting.
Yes, and I've actually seen it. When I was investigating on this book, when I was doing, um, like I said, you don't just sit down and write a novel based on true events. You better know what you're talking about, because people are going to come back, and especially those that live in the town. So I need to make sure that I had everything on the up and up. There was a general store, and it's still there to this day. Um, the first patrons, if you will, those that had helped build the general store, one of them happened to be Maggie and James Horton. And like I said, I went inside of the store. It's a beautiful store, very rustic, very picturesque. Has the old cash register. It's, kind of like going back in time. And there is a picture on the wall on the general store of the first patrons and those that had helped. And Maggie and James Horton are in that picture with a group of other wives and their husbands and friends. So I was able to see that picture. Now, Laura Stone was also able to point out who is in her house. She was able to look at Maggie Horton's picture at the general store and says, that's the face I saw in my bathroom. That's the woman right there. Right there. That's her. And so they were able to put a face. They were finally able to see what she looked like. Beautiful woman. Beautiful young lady. Long brown hair. She had on a gray ankle-length dress, shoes that tied up, um, 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 just a gorgeous girl, very, very pretty. Her husband was older. James Horton was older. He was known to be very mean, ruled with an iron fist. He liked to start fights. He was known to get what he wants when he wants. And so that's why when the bones were found at the Horton property and they took the bones, they took the skeletal remains to a makeshift morgue. You have to understand, back in 1944, they did not have the medical technology that they do today. When they turned her skull over, it had been smashed in two. She didn't die from dehydration and exhaustion. He beat her to death. That is what they think. Excuse me.
Okay, now she, from what you can find out, basically he hit her, she fell, cracked her skull, and that's how the shoe marks got dug in the floor.
That's right, because when you're fighting for your life and you're trying to get away, not only are you moving your hands, frailing your hands, but you're also frailing your feet. You're trying to get up. And the back of her shoes, the back of her heels, dug into that wood planked floor, producing the shoe marks. Thus, the name of the novel is called Shoe Marks. That's why I named it that. Kind of a strange name, not your everyday kind of name for a novel, but that's how I came up with the name Shoe Marks. But yes, but back to your question, yes, her picture is in the general store, and it's still there to this day. Yes, a lot of research, like I said, went into the making of this novel. I have got stacks and stacks of paper, of handwritten notes, going inside of the Horton home. I wanted to make sure that I got the furniture right, that I got the banister right, that I got the shoe marks right, that I got the smoking room right, that I got the ladies' room right, the kitchen right. There are some things in that home that are still original to the house, and one of them is the old cast wood-burning stove that is still there. I wanted to make sure that I got everything right, because when I sat down to write this novel, I wanted to bring the reader in, and I hope that I have done that. I hope that I have.
Yeah, you did very well.
Thank you. So
now I wanted to also I wanted to get into the professor from the university. They did actually come and investigate the house, right?
Actually, the university professor did not, but he hooked them up. What they did was that they needed help. this family, like I said, they didn't know what to do. Investigators back then, not prevalent. You can find one on every corner now, just like a hair salon.
Right.
And so, there was not a lot of them. But the notoriety that this family had after it made its way to the papers. And there's something else that I need to also mention that's really important. While the Stones were talking to the professor, and they go and they talk to the psychologist, he says, I know somebody who does this kind of work. Now, I don't know if he would be willing to drive all the way from New England. I don't know if they actually lived in Maine. I don't know if they would be willing to travel all the way down here to Texas. That's 1,800 miles. And to carry all their equipment, the equipment that they use during the day, I don't know if they would be willing to do that, but you can write them a letter. I have their address, and you can try. They did write a letter, and they did get a response. And this husband and wife team, and I'm going to straighten this out now. Some people have asked me if it's Ed and Lorraine Warren. No, it is not. Ed and Lorraine Ed and Lorraine did not come on the scene until later. They were very popular back in the 70s, popular back in the 80s, they were popular in the 60s, but this is 1940. So I want to clear that up right now because I've had a lot of people ask me that. They come down, they take the train down, and they bring their equipment with them, and they reveal so much about what happened inside of this home. It would make the hairs on your arms, mine are standing up already. They felt things that, oh my gosh. The doctor walked inside of the home and he choked. He grabbed his throat and he said, I cannot breathe in this house. I'm about to faint. And he had to go back outside. And his wife said, if you're going to help this poor family, you need to get yourself back in there. And they did. Bless their hearts, they were scratched. The wife was scratched on her neck. Wallpaper would actually peel off the wall when they were communicating with Maggie, when they had their reel-to-reel tape recorders going, what they used back then, the dowsing rods. Oh my gosh, paper went actually off the walls. Um, the wife was scratched on the neck, she was scratched on the arms, the doctor was scratched, she was pushed, furniture fell down the stairwell. It was absolutely horrific what this paranormal investigator not only did what they had to go through, the hell that they had to go through, but also what the family had to go through. Now, um, I felt like that it was really important to show what I know that this family experienced. And it was something, and the doctor said, Dr. Carter, he said, never in my life have I ever before.
Now, didn't you say something about the it being so cold in the room that ice formed on the
Yes,
walls?
it
Or
did. Yes, it was so freezing in there that ice began to form. Not only could they see their breath, but they could see ice crystals. And it was freezing, absolutely freezing. I guess when you're that angry, when your spirit's that angry, you had your cold and you had your warm. It was so cold, it was freezing. Their bodies were actually shivering and they could see their breath. And yes, they did find ice crystals. It was so cold in that house. I mean, the paranormal activity was absolutely hellacious. Absolutely hellacious. Maggie Horton would manifest herself in several ways, not only through speaking, not only through writing on the walls, but also she manifested herself in a clock that had stopped at 9 o'clock. Absolutely. I get chills just talking about it, but if you can imagine me writing about it, um, not only was I bringing this person alive, and I was bringing Maggie Horton back to life, if you will, through the pages of this novel, I needed to make sure that I got everything right and what this family had to go through. Dr. Carter had photos and photos and uh, voices that were caught on tape. Um, it was absolutely unreal what this family had to go through. They were fighting for their lives as well.
I was gonna say what I kind of lost my train of thought there. Um, she did actually manifest herself, did she not?
She did several times. She did several
I
times.
mean, full figure
Full
apparition.
figure apparition, you better believe it, yes. The family actually saw her by the banister, standing by the banister. They saw her in the kitchen when Jeremy Horton, when they came home from a picnic. There were two butcher knives that were in the middle of the kitchen table. Now, how they got there, they have absolutely no idea. But when they came back, the knives would actually move in the direction of Laura, not Jeremy, but of Laura. And one of the knives shot out, almost missing her by inches, could have killed her, and it embedded itself in the wall. When Jeremy picked up the knife in the reflection of the butcher knife blade, he did see her face. He did see what she looked like. Another time, Laura Stone, also Jennifer, saw her in the bathroom. It scared Laura half to death. Another time, they did see her by the banister. Um, and also, too, the photos that were taken with the Vito camera with the newspaper men, reporters that came out, they too saw apparitions of her, a full body apparition. One of them, from what I understand, was standing right by the children. And so, yes, she has been seen, not only in pictures, not only taken by the news reporters, not only hanging on the wall in the general store, but she was also seen with the naked eye as well.
Okay. I'm kind of trying to hold off from the last part because the last part's gonna blow everybody's mind.
It does blow your mind, and so that
Yes.
that needs to be a very well kept secret because so many people
Right.
ask.
Right. Right.
So many people
I'm,
ask.
we still got about 30 minutes, so I was trying to hold off on that till a little bit later because the ending is awesome and creepy as hell.
Oh
So
yeah. Oh yes. Absolutely. Very
so
very scary.
everybody be prepared for the ending of this because you're gonna love the ending.
Wow.
Um, there's just so many things when you get into stuff like this. Frank knows what I'm saying. You don't
Hmm.
never know what you're gonna run into when you
Right.
go into a place, and you may go in there thinking, well, this is like any other typical, investigation. We're going to go in there, set up equipment, and, uh, nothing's going to happen. And if it does, it's not going to be much, right? Because that happens a lot.
Hmm.
Right.
And you walk into that one place, and boy, was I not prepared.
I
Oh
know
uh,
yeah.
that feeling well.
Oh
yeah.
yes.
But and also her apparition was seen in the door. I think one time you said
Yes, it
too.
was. Yes, it was. Definitely. She showed herself in several several places in the home. The children actually saw her as well. They were playing checkers, and uh, Jennifer remembers that she was about to place one on top of her brother's, and it was a king. Of course, you king the checker, on the other side,
Right,
you
right.
know, and the checker started moving, and the children became scared to death, and they said, "Oh no, it's happening again." And they heard footsteps, and they hear what sounds like a ball bouncing. It would bounce up against the wall, it sounded like, and then it would bounce on the floor. Kind of like when you throw a ball up against the wall and it bounces on the floor, you catch it and you throw it again and it bounces on the wall and it, goes on the floor. That's what it sounded like to them, and scared to death. And I remember Jennifer telling me that she felt the blood drain to her feet. If you could be that scared. And they walked up the staircase and they peeked just over the top stair. And that is exactly what they saw. They saw his ball bouncing against the wall, landing on the floor, and bounced against the wall again. And then they did see Maggie Horton once again, and she ran away. Absolutely
Now,
hellacious book.
and I got to go back for a second because I'm my mind is kind of like loose like that. Um, wasn't there a time when she was seen actually in the rocking chair rocking the baby, their baby?
She was seen in the rocking chair when the reporters came out. Mr. Green had taken a photograph of the rocking chair because it was interested and scared at the same time on why the rocking chair was moving by itself. And he kept looking for fishing line. He would get down on his hands and knees, and he would look for whatever was making this rocking chair move. You have to remember, this was when the bones were found. So Maggie Horton's remains were unearthed. They were sitting on top of a mound of dirt. You got the reporters inside of the home. You have the sheriff and all these people that are outside that are uh, um, by Jeremy Stone, and Mr. Green flashes his veto camera at the rocking Horton's apparition. She's sitting in a chair with her arms crossed over her midsection. And so, yes, like I said, not only was she seen with the naked eye, she was also seen in pictures as well. A very, very beautiful young lady. Life taken from her at 16 years of age. I mean, she's only a kid. She hadn't even lived yet.
Right.
So,
Now the guys that did the paranormal team, they produce EVPs and stuff from the
they
investigation?
did get EVPs. Yes, they did. Some of them, from what I understand, was singing actual to verbally communicate when asked questions. One of the questions that was asked is, "Did you kill James Horton?" And you're going to read about that later in the book. And she says, "Yes, yes." So, yes, her voice was caught on several times on EVPs. Um, don't think, and this is important, and I had somebody argue with me about this. I guess they thought they knew what they were talking about. Reel-to-reel tape recorders were well used back in the 1940s. And somebody told me that they were not used until the late 50s and 60s. That is not true. I did my investigation. I know what I'm talking about. I, like I said, 2 years went into investigating the writing of this book. And yes, one of the very first EVPs, I believe, ever captured was by Thomas Edison. And I had that in the book of shoe marks. But yes, to answer your question, questioned, they definitely did get EVPs, they did get intelligent answers, they were scratched, they were hit, furniture was thrown. Like I said, they were fighting for their lives inside of that home.
Okay, now was it only Maggie's spirit that was
It was
attacking
only,
them, or was it also her husband's spirit?
no, it was only Maggie's from what they understand. They heard her voice. She had manifested
Okay.
herself in several ways. She wanted to, she, and I truly believe this, that she wanted everyone to know how she died because nobody really knew. The husband told everyone in attendance at the funeral that she had died from dehydration and exhaustion.
Oh, oh! Thank you for bringing that up.
Yes,
The funeral.
yes.
Tell the listeners about the
Oh,
funeral.
yes. After Maggie Horton was murdered, of course, I wasn't there, you were not there, we can only speculate on what happened. But because of the fact that her bones were found on the property and that her skull was split in two in the back, which indicates that she had taken some very significant blows, her her body was buried there on the property. Now, I will say this: back in the 1800s, yes, they did have cemeteries, but not like what they are today. Most of them you can find under a shade tree. You'll find maybe
Hmm.
20 of them out in the country. Now they have
Right.
a fence built around them because you don't want those gravestones um, messed with or played with. She, when uh, the church had actually brought a beautiful gravestone to put at the head of Maggie Horton's um, grave site. And there were some white rocks, from what I understand, that went around the grave site. That is where he had buried her. And he had lied about it. He murdered her, of course. He lied about it. He threw her body in a shallow grave and just covered her with dirt. Went inside of the house and got drunk. He was a drunkard as well, from what I understand. Bad alcoholic.
Okay, when I was referring to the funeral, I was referring to the original.
The original funeral, yes.
When the people from the town actually came
Yes.
and he told them all the baloney that
Oh,
he told
yeah,
them, and
yes. From what I understand from the stories that I got from ancestors that were there, is that he was just sobbing and apologetic, and I can't believe this has happened to my wife. What am I going to do with my son? There were women who actually took that baby, who were nursing and had nursed that baby. Um, it,
that's one of the things I was going to bring up. He pretty much gave his son to this family, and he just
he took
disappeared.
off. Yes, he did. He gave the baby up for adoption. He left it with a church family member. He said goodbye to his son, and he was never seen again until later. And from what I understand, the adoptive parents were killed in a fire. Of course, the son survived. I'm not going to go too much into that, but yes, that is what happened. And just all these lies that came out and telling everybody that, you know, died from exhaustion. This is what happened, and oh, it was just horrible. And everybody fell for it because there was death back then. There was a drought back then, and yes, people
And
did die.
people did die from heat
Yes, they
exhaustion
did.
and lack of water and all that kind of stuff.
That's right. That's right. I felt like that it was important in the novel of Shoe Marks to not only bring in what the Stone family went through, but what the Horton family went through with the town went through, on just different facets that I felt like that I needed to touch on. I didn't want to leave anything out, and so that's why the novel's 300 pages. Of course, that's now today that's a very lengthy novel, but I felt like it was important just to bring everything full circle.
And we're gonna get to that full circle here soon, y'all. So hang on to your britches. You're gonna love it. But anyway, I would love, and not just for the paranormal aspect per se, but I'm one of these type people that if I investigate like an old house or something like that, I'm not only investigating the paranormal, I'm investigating the history.
That's right.
So if I go into a house like that, I'm not only looking for any kind of activity that's not explainable. I'm looking at the woodwork, what does the stair rail look like? If there's any like old pictures still hanging on the wall, anything that tells me a little bit of the history. Um, and that's one of my pet peeves is when they tear down old places like that. It burns me up.
Oh yes. Oh yeah. It does me too. Because you're tearing down the fabric of America.
Well, the way I see it is you're tearing down someone's life.
That's right.
Okay. The original builders of that place, maybe they didn't stay there. They might have been there a certain length of time and they moved on. But when they built that was their dream.
You are correct.
That was their. That meant about as much to them as their husband or wife. Okay. It was a big part of their life. So you're destroying someone's life, whether they be passed on or whatever.
That is correct.
I almost look at that the same way as you don't go down and disturb the Titanic because it's actually a gravesite.
That's right. And back then too, farming was, in the South, farming and cotton, that was the industry.
Right.
You were, of course, they didn't have the caste system here in the United States, but, you were famous, you were labeled rich if you had a good-looking barn. I mean,
right.
Your barn was your life. That was your livelihood. The kids worked the farm, the husband and wife worked the farm, but that farm, that piece of land, that was your livelihood. And so, yes.
Well, and your house and your barn were sort of your social stature.
Of course it was. Of course it was. You're absolutely
so
right.
So if you had a big fancy house, and a big fancy barn, you were just, all that and a bag of chips in them days.
Yes, you were. Yep.
For the best way to explain it. Anyway, we're getting closer here to time to go into, and I keep bringing this up because I want everybody to be on the edge of their seats. Because you're gonna love the ending. But anyway, and I still can't get over it being so cold in that room that ice actually formed on the windows and the walls and stuff in there. That is extreme activity. What that does, it's not something that you see.
Right.
Like, and you could go through hundreds of cases and not have anything like that.
That's right. That's right. I mean, it was.
I mean, that.
It was hellacious.
Yeah, I mean, and now we're and I should have mentioned this earlier and it didn't come to me, but were any of the people in there pushed, thrown, shoved, kind of any kind of physical kind of thing, or?
Yes, yes. The paranormal investigators who came in, she was scratched where her neck was bleeding.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay. Did they have that on film or camera or anything?
I don't know. All I know is they've since passed on, and I wish that I could talk to them and find out exactly what happened. From what I understand, because the family did stay, yes, they were scratched to the point to where she was bleeding. Maggie was mad, and she wanted to let everybody know that she was mad. And so, yes, there was a lot that was caught on tape. There was a lot that was caught in pictures. There was a lot that was caught with the naked eye. But yes, things were shoved. Uh, the the From what I understand, and I've been inside of the room, the rocking chair is still there. The baby bassinet is not, because it was thrown down the stairwell. It was thrown down the stairs. Um,
Well, I mean, I could see her being um, ticked off because he literally got away with what he did.
yes. Oh yeah, he got away with it. There was another time too, and I have this in the book of Schumart's. Of course, you read it, where Jeremy Stone was actually touched when he was in bed.
Right, and I
Yes,
remember
was
that.
touched on his forehead, and he woke up and he told his wife about it. Um, just so many things that have happened to this family, and things that are in the book. You know, bringing her back to life has been not only an adventure for me, but it's also been kind of scary for me as well. When I went inside of the Horton home, I was able to spend 3 days in there. The reason why is because I wanted to get everything right. Not only did I want to experience things myself, and I did. People have asked, "What did you hear? What did you see?" I got very sick to my stomach. I felt like the air was being drained from my body. I felt like the energy. I got extremely tired. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it does to me. Um, Extremely tired. I felt like that I was being choked. The oxygen was being drained from my lungs, if you will. I heard singing. Now, Maggie Horton, she loved to sing. And one of her favorite songs was Amazing Grace. How sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. And I heard this. That's what I heard. Of course, I can't sing very well now, but I'm trying to depict, trying to imitate. That's what I heard. I also heard footsteps, hard footsteps, like having boots on, kind of like footsteps. I walked through cold spots. I walked through hot spots. There were times that I could walk into the kitchen and I was just sweating. And then I could walk by the banister and I was freezing. I was actually able to see the shoe marks.
Now, did you actually touch the blood in the shoe marks?
It was moist. I wanted it to turn red so bad, but it didn't. Not for me. I wish it had, but the wood was moist. And that's good enough for me. Because you don't really have moist wood inside of a house. You'll have it on the outside, but not on the inside. And it wasn't raining that day. It was very hot. It was in the summer. Um, in fact, there was a burn ban. You could not even burn anything. I do remember that very well because it was hot. Um, but the wood was moist, and that's good enough for me. When I would put my fingers in it, I could rub my fingers together, and I could feel the moisture. So,
What was it, like a sticky, kind of warm feeling, or?
yeah, it was. Wet wood. That's what it felt like to me. Um, but I was actually able to see them. I was able to view the rocking chair that is still in her room to this day. I was able to smell perfume Maggie loved perfume, and I was able to smell perfume. It smelled like roses to me. Um, kind, well, not roses, but kind of a floral smell. Um, so it was very interesting. But also in writing shoe marks, people have asked me, "Did you experience anything while writing it?" Yes, I did. When I went home and I started writing the book, I felt a touch on top of my head, like a hand was on top of my head. And it went down the back of my head, and something patted my shoulder. And I froze in my chair. Another,
So do you think that was her
I
saying,
do.
"Yeah, I want my story told,"
I,
or
I'm not sure, but that's what I'm thinking. When you investigate something, when you go inside of a home, you may not take something tangible with you, but you do touch a life. And that's important. You are touching someone's life, someone that has died. And so you bring that back with you. And I've had a lot of paranormal um, investigative friends tell me that they totally agree with me. That when you go inside of a home, you do an investigation, you get your EVPs, um, you get your voice box out, you hear um, um, intelligent answers or residual answers. You take your pictures, you're touching a life, and so you bring that away with you. And so when I started writing shoe marks, I was touched on top of the head. I'll never forget it as long as I live. I'm getting chill bumps just talking about it. Another time I was reading shoe marks, the final draft, before it went to publication. That's another story there. Because I never thought that I would ever get published. Um, um, especially writing my first book. Um, but I was reading the final draft to a very dear friend of mine named Zarita. She's also an author. And both of our computers started making these squiggly line looking things. And I said, "What's happening to your computer?" "Something's going on with my computer." And she said, "Well, something's going on with mine." Both of our computers crashed at the same time, instantly.
wow.
Another time that I was writing on shoe marks, I felt a very intense heat on the left side of my arm, like you're standing near a hot stove. That's how warm it was. And it felt feminine. It did not, I did not feel anger. I did not feel resentment. I did not feel like it was a man. I felt like it was feminine. Was it Maggie Horton? I don't know. I've done 157 interviews, worldwide interviews about this book. Some of them have been on internet and television as well. And I'm surprised, um, Roger and Frank, that something hadn't happened. Because I'll lose sound. Somebody will start hearing voices. There was one woman who actually heard a woman's voice going, "Yes, yes, yes." There was another time on a radio interview where everything crashed, and I mean everything. Um, so I'm kind of surprised that there hasn't been some kind of technical difficulty while I'm talking about her. Excuse me.
Okay, we're coming up on the 10-minute mark, so I have been promising everybody the ending.
If I choose to tell the ending,
If you choose to tell the ending. Um, I hope you will.
I think she just basically told you not to write a check that you can't cash. So many words.
Well, don't give me an overdraft charge, okay? Because, yeah. Anyway, if Karen is willing, she will tell you about the ending, what happened with what happened when the husband decided to show back up.
Oh yes, he did show back, but that's not the ending. That's not the ending,
Well,
I am willing to talk about that. Yes. Now the ending, I'm going to leave that a surprise. That is a surprise, but yes, the husband does show the husband, and boy, does he get it.
yeah, and that's
When,
I'll bring tools.
when
Okay.
I'll say this, and I'm not going to talk about it too long because, like I said, I don't have 6 hours. But when it made the papers, when Maggie Horton's remains were found on the property, it did make the papers. Not only did it make the town paper, but it spread like wildfire all over the United States. Now, like I said, I have had to protect some names. That's a given. And people do respect that. But yes, he does show back up later in years. He is now an old man. He now has very gray hair, and he makes his way inside of the home, and that was the worst thing that he could have done. And he did it when the paranormal investigators were there. If you think hell broke loose when the paranormal investigators were there, you just need to read what happened to James Horton because he got what was coming to him. One of the things that, and they heard this audibly, is that Maggie manifested herself not only um, through speaking on tape, but she also manifested herself through objects. And one things that she said to James Horton was, "You taught me a lesson. Didn't I learn it well?" And she lets loose on him. Yes, people can be scratched when they have investigators come to your home. You better believe it. I've seen it happen. I went with a team that was scratched. I've seen somebody that has been pulled from a chair. I've seen that. I've seen people that have tripped and nothing was there. Can you get hurt? Yes, of course you can. And definitely James Horton was hurt once again. That's basically all I'm going to say about that because I know that we're going to be winding this down. But, you know, people that have read shoe marks, if you read the comments, that it grabs you, it does something to you. It's a book that you can't get out of your mind. Once you read it, you can't get it out of your mind. And I'm thankful that it has that effect.
I remember very well when you sent me the PDF and I read it before we did the interview
Yes.
the first time around. And I'll be honest with you, I was thinking, well, this is your typical, uh, you know, paranormal story and blah, blah, blah. And boy, once I got into that thing, I'm like, no, this is not your typical paranormal story. You know, this is some crazy stuff.
Yep.
And yee, man. And a lot of the things that you talked about and everything, I remember reading those parts, and we did leave out the part about where Maggie went to milk the cows or whatever, and the guy was in the barn, and the
Yes.
husband showed up and
Yes.
got all bent out of shape and all that, uh, which is probably why the guy's spirit is seen at the pond. But anyway, uh, you pretty much figure that John Horton did away with him also. Uh, it she didn't want to give away the ending, and I understand that. Didn't think about it that way, but uh, you guys really do want to read this book, and the ending will blow your mind. Trust me. Uh, I say this with wholeheartedness because when I read the end of that story, I'm like, damn.
I hear a
You know
lot
what
of
else?
that.
How better way to
Right.
explain it? Because I was not expecting that.
Yeah,
I'm like, damn, give it to him. Because that's what I wanted. But
I hear a
uh,
lot that readers are cheering, at the end of the book because they want that revenge, and I understand that. If you're,
well, you want it for her as much as she did.
oh yeah,
Because he literally got by with what he done. He got to go live his life free as a bird after doing what he did.
yes, he did for many years.
So yeah, I wanted him to get his.
Well, he got it. He sure did.
And if you read that book at the end of it, you will find out how he got his, and you will love it. Trust me. If anybody feels like I do, that somebody that gets by with something like that, gets to go live free as a bird, gets what's coming to them in the end, you gotta love it.
Yeah.
Right.
And I mean that. Oh God. Yeah, trust me, you'll love it. If you haven't read the book, go out and get it. You will enjoy it, and that's all I'm going to say about that, as Forrest Gump said. Uh,
I'm definitely looking forward to reading it.
all right, no logic exists in this situation at all.
You can actually find the novel Shoe Marks along with Secrets in the Shallows. You can actually find that on Amazon. You can
Right.
go to Barnes and Noble and order it if you want to. You can also get it on barnesandnoble.com. You can visit my Facebook page under Karen Vance Hammond. That's Karen Vance with a V as in Victor, Vance, Karen Vance Hammond. I also have an author page on Facebook. I did have a website, but that is down for maintenance right now, and that has not been brought back up. So you,
Well, you beat me to it. I was going to tell you to give everybody the links to find
Yes.
that, and also if they want to friend you on Facebook, do so because you'll enjoy Karen. She's
well,
a sweetie.
thank you so much, Roger. You're so sweet. Frank, you too.
Well, well, thank you, and it. I'll tell you, it has been, 'cause I haven't said much the whole show. I mean, I've just
I noticed that you were kind of just sitting back going, "What the
no,
hell?"
I mean, I've been sitting back in awe. And to get me to shut up, that's an accomplishment. I'm going to go ahead and
He's
acknowledge
right,
that.
Karen. Trust me, he's right. To
Roger
get
has to
him
do
to
it to
be
me all the
quiet,
time.
you got to be telling a good story.
Right. So I mean that, but I've been sitting back and, you know, just amazement. So yes, I personally I can't wait to get a hold of this book. That's awesome.
That is one of the do reads for the year. Trust me, you'll love it. Um, I like I said, I'm one of these people. I don't read a lot, and I have to. If I read a book and I lose interest, I will start skipping through it to see what happens in the end. I do it every time. That book, I did not skip a page. I read the entire thing and I was amazed, and I'm like, wow. So yeah, it says a lot if it gets me to go through the entire thing and not skip a page.
Well, thank
Right.
you. You are so sweet.
Right. I mean I can relate to that because the whole time I'm hanging on every word as you're talking about it, and this coming from somebody who's the reason they invented pop-up books. I mean, so
Yeah.
that's awesome.
A lot.
Well, I and Frank, you got to write a book about your experiences. See, we got to get a Frank Lee novel out here too.
I'm working
Uh,
on one. So so
but really, all in all, you guys, it's 9 o'clock and we've got to wind this down. I want to thank Karen very much for coming on with us. Uh, I want to thank my co-host, Mr. Frank Lee. He's an awesome guy. And everybody in the chat room that was listening in, we appreciated everybody listening in on the phones and what have you. We appreciate you. Couldn't have a show without you. And I will see everybody not next week because we are taking the Easter Monday off. But on the 13th we have I'm sorry. I've got this dang cold, y'all. It's kind of messing with my sinuses and stuff. But we have Michael Gray, who does a show on CJ Mars Network called Parlay.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to, he has haunting experiences, also can tell us a lot about UFOs, cover-ups, and all that kind of thing, and stuff in the supernatural world. So we're looking forward to that one. And I will say my fare thee wells. Thanks again, everybody, for being here.
Frank, thank you. Frank and Roger, thank you so much for having me on. It has really been a lot of fun. Thank you.
Well,
We enjoyed you very much.
yes,
Thank you
for coming on. It's been wonderful having you and listening. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm sure the listeners have as well. So thank you once again.
You're welcome.
And to everyone who tuned in tonight, thank you for tuning in. We appreciate every one of you.
Cat, CJ, Big Bird, all you guys, the ones that were here and had to leave or whatever, Danielle, Josh, the whole bunch of you, we appreciate you. Come back next week, or week after next, I'm sorry. And we will see y'all then.
Join host Roger Belt and the teacher Frank Lee on the Half-Past Dead Paranormal Roundtable on the Paranormal King Radio Network every Monday night at this same time for another haunted evening.
Welcome to my breakdown.